They say my home is my castle, the place where everyone feels safe. It's cozy there. This is the place where we can be ourselves, not afraid of anything. Keep ourselves away from the horrors of outer world. But when your own apartment becomes a prison you can't leave, when your only safe place transforms into a living nightmare, it turns obvious that there is no place in this world to feel safe. And if you're ready, let's start talking about the fourth part of Silent Hill. The release of the fourth part of the game was quite a surprise for many players since it was released in June 2004, after slightly less than a year after the release of Silent Hill 3. The thing is that those games were developed around the same time, almost simultaneously. That's why the difference between releases was not so big. The fourth part got the subhead The Room, and it was really different from the gameplay mechanics of previous parts. And considering the plot had almost no connection with the first three games. Based on these facts, many fans had a point that at first it was a project called simply The Room, and in the very last moment it was decided to make this one a part of the franchise. A little bit later, the workers of Team Sullivan disproved that guess, claiming that they wanted to make another Silent Hill game. They claimed that in a sense this is true because the game began live as simply Room 302. However, it was always at least a spin-off of Silent Hill, and the most important thing was simply that it be different to the previous games. Certainly, if Silent Hill had not existed, we would not have gotten the idea for The Room, so in that sense, they have always been together. But at the same time, they wanted this franchise to change. It's already hard to say how it was back then, just let's take a closer look at the game itself and find out why this part is considered one of the most ambiguous in the franchise. Here we have a new playable character, Henry Townsend. He doesn't have any idea or intention of going to Silent Hill. Yes, he visited this town some time ago and even took some things from that place. And these things were just photos of some beautiful places and not some newborn child who was found on the road. 2 years before the events of the game, he moved to the apartment 302, situated in a fictional town of South Ashfield. But one day he started seeing horrible nightmares, realizing afterward that he's not able to leave his apartment. Neighbors can hear his screams, TV and radio don't seem to work. Windows are completely blocked and there are chains hanging on the exit door. And the weirdest thing is that those chains were placed by someone from the inside.
What the hell? What's going on here?
On the 5th day of his imprisonment, Henry finds a very interesting discovery. There is a huge hole in his bathroom and mysterious voices are heard from it. Since there is no other options of leaving the apartment, he tries to examine this hole, which turns out to be much deeper than he thought. When Henry gets out, he will find himself on a subway station and meet a woman called Cynthia Velasquez. She's completely sure that this is just a dream, and because of that, she doesn't seem to take anything seriously. But although this is a dream, she asks our protagonist to help her get out of this place. And as a reward, she promises him a certain special favor. And if you pay attention to her outfit, it turns quite obvious what favor she's offering.
I'm kinda scared all alone. I'll do a special favor for you later. It's just a dream, so I might as well have some fun.
But she'll feel sick soon enough and will hide in the closest toilet room, and Henry, in the meantime, will be attacked by monstrous dogs. After defeating them, Henry decides to find out whether Cynthia is fine, but doesn't find her in the toilet room. But instead of that, he finds the hole in the wall, which looks similar to the one he saw in his apartment. After going through it, he wakes up in his apartment again. And there are a lot of interesting things in it, many things to find and observe. In general, the room in this game is a very unique and interesting innovation, but as usual, I'll tell you about it after retelling the plot.
What? Another dream. but it seems so real.
Henry returns to the subway through the hole and starts looking for Cynthia, and he finds her trapped in one of the subway cars. Despite the dominance of monsters, our heroes manage to unite, but not for long. After a while, the woman disappears again. Soon after that, Henry will hear her voice via the loudspeaker communication system. She says that she was able to find a way out and asks Henry to come to ticket barriers. When Henry gets there, he finds out that something horrible happened to Cynthia. She's lying on the floor in a cashier's cabin, barely alive, bleeding to death, and there is a number, 16,121, cut on her chest. In the depths of despair, the woman tries to calm herself that this is just a dream, but it's quite obvious, judging by the way she pronounces those words, that she doesn't believe in what she's saying.
I feel like I'm dying.
It's okay. It's just a dream.
After Cynthia's death, Henry suddenly wakes up in his room, goes to the bathroom and notices that the hole has become bigger. And again, after going through, he will find himself in a certain forest. But it's not some ordinary forest. This forest is situated in the neighborhood of, finally, Silent Hill. Here Henry will meet a young stuttering guy, Jasper Gain. He's a fan of everything paranormal, supernatural and creepy. He's come to Silent Hill to find out more information about the cult of Silent Hill, because there is a wish house situated in the forest, an orphan home that belonged to the cult, where the younger generation was taught of all cobwebs and beliefs. But now this building is abandoned. They go into the house, and while Henry was dealing with the notes on the first floor, Jasper managed to get into one of the rooms. From this room, Henry could hear screams and saw the smoke coming out. Henry runs into the room and finds Jasper aflame. He's holding a candlestick and cuts number 17,121 on his chest. Then he screams out that he's finally met the devil and dies afterward.
I finally met him! The one the nosy guy talked about! The devil!
And again, Henry wakes up in his bed and again goes through the expanding hole. The next place he's about to visit is a water prison, situated somewhere in the middle of the Toluca Lake. This is the cylindrical concrete building with prison cells on different levels. This water prison was clearly inspired by Panopticon, a type of institutional building and system of control designed by the English philosopher and social theorist Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century. From its center, the warden could observe little children and how they behaved through the holes. This was the prison where children who behaved badly or were persuaded that they behaved badly were sent from the wish house. These children were convinced that they were being kept under constant surveillance, and it drove a lot of children crazy. It is rumored that there is a death chamber behind the kitchen, and the cooks take meat from corpses and cook it, feeding it to children afterward. It's still possible that Walter has never seen the room itself, so the other world just interprets his fears like this. In one of the prison cells, Henry will be able to find Andrew DeSalvo, the watchman of this prison. He asks Henry to help him out, otherwise someone will come after him. After his release, we will find him in a company with an unknown little boy. Andrew is definitely begging for something, but the unknown boy doesn't answer. We only find out his name, Walter Sullivan. And after some time of running, Henry will find Andrew's dead body in the water, with a number on his chest, 18,121. Waking up again, the hole again. When he reaches the hotel standing not far from that place, a person called Richard Brantree will literally fall next to him. He's a neighbor who lives in the same building with Henry. Richard has no clue what the hell is going on, but he recognizes Henry and puts forward a hypothesis that since they're both stuck in the supernatural world, then something is wrong with the whole building they live in. Also, he mentions the other guy who used to live in the room 302 before Henry, a journalist who started behaving extremely strange and stopped leaving his apartment after some time, just like Henry, and is claimed to be missing in the end. It becomes obvious that he was trapped just like our protagonist. After some time, Henry will notice his neighbor with the same boy he saw in the water prison. Richard thinks that the boy definitely knows more about what's happening around than anyone else. He threatens the boy with a gun, trying to pull out the information from him. But he shouldn't have done that. It all ended up with no good for him. The last time Henry meets him when Richard is chained to the electric chair, with numbers 19,121 on his forehead. After waking up again and going through the hole, Henry will find himself not somewhere, but in the building he lives. But the exit is far away since the whole building is now situated in a supernatural world. Henry sees a person with long hair who's knocking the door number 303, where Eileen Galvin is living. Our protagonist had a chance to sneak up on her through the hole in the wall that he accidentally found at the beginning of the game. But, as I've already said, I'll talk about it later. Then, a pretty big part of the game is connected with attempts to enter this apartment. But when Henry manages to do that, it's already too late. Eileen is lying on the floor, bleeding. There is a number on her back, 20,121. And already familiar to us, little boy Walter Sullivan is standing in front of her. With her last bit of strength, she asks him whether he was able to find his mother, and asks him to get out of there because this place is dangerous.
Did you find your mommy? This place? It's dangerous. You need to hurry. Get out of here.
After these words, she passes out, but it all happens to be not so sad in the end. She was seriously injured but didn't die. She was brought to the hospital of St. Jerome, and as you may guess, this is the place where the other hole led Henry to. And I say the other on purpose, since the hole in the bathroom was blocked. But Henry managed to find another one that was hidden in a small room and that he was able to open using special plates he found on the levels. In one of the rooms, Henry finds a bandaged Eileen. Of course, she doesn't have a clue about what's happening, so she decides to follow Henry. Henry offers to leave the place through the hole, but it turns out that it's not so easy. Only Henry can go through it. Eileen simply doesn't see it, so she won't be able to leave this place. It seems like a dead end, but help came from the last place they expected. Someone puts a letter under the entrance door from an unknown Joseph. Actually, players could see these red pages several times depending on how many times they came back to the apartment. It is written there that if Henry wants to end all this, he has to go into the very depth of this nightmare to learn the truth. According to Eileen, that letter was probably written by the former owner of the apartment 302, Joseph Schreiber. He was a journalist and carried out a religious investigation that concerned Walter Sullivan. This is the only lead they have.
I got this letter from him. He told me to go down into the deepest part of him, and to look for the ultimate truth. Let's do that. There must be something down there.
Then they find huge heliciform stairs. They go down to the heart of this nightmare, visiting places they have already visited during the game. At the same time, a lot of strange and horrible things happen to Henry's room, about which we'll talk a bit later. In the very end, they will find an entrance door leading to the apartment 302, but it looks different. Everything is black and white, the furniture is moved, and the ritual candles are placed all over the apartment. And at this moment, from the ceiling, a ghost of Joseph Schreiber appears, the former owner of the apartment. He will tell many secrets to our heroes that he dug out along his investigation. And finally, let's find out what the hell has been happening here. First of all, who's that long-haired guy? His name is Walter Sullivan. Yeah, that's right. The guy and that little boy is the same person. And now I'll tell you his story. It all started 34 years before the events of the game. He was born in Asheville City in apartment 302. His mother and father abandoned him and fled to an unknown location. Later he was found by a watchman, attention, Frank Sunderland. He's the father of the main protagonist from Silent Hill 2, James Sunderland. He took the baby to a hospital and saved that baby's umbilical cord. According to some notes, he just couldn't throw it away for some reason. After some time, this poor boy was sent to the Wish House orphanage, which was the property of the cult of Silent Hill as we remember. He spent several years there and, at one moment, met Dahlia Gillespie, who told him that Walter's mother is in Ashfield, but now she's asleep. Seemed like another fanatic rubbish, but Walter took her words seriously and literally. In that case, he thought that his mom was the room number 302. In one of the cult's books, he read about a ritual called 21 Sacraments, which would help him wake up his sleeping mother. In order to complete it, a person had to murder 21 people. After the first 10 victims, Walter was caught by the police and put into jail where he committed suicide. There was a small article about it in one of the papers in Silent Hill 2. And do you remember how I mentioned about the fourth grave in the Toluca prison? There is a name inscribed on the tombstone, Walter Sullivan. But as it turned out, Walter didn't die. Probably the police caught a wrong person. Nevertheless, Walter didn't live much longer since the 11th murder was a self-sacrifice, and he committed suicide in room 302. And his corpse is still there. Henry finds him when he breaks the false wall in the corridor. After his death, Walter became a ghost and continued his ritual in this form. And now we can understand the meaning of those numbers on victims' bodies. These are neither 16,121, nor 17,121, and nor 18,121. These are 16 out of 21, 17 out of 21, etc. After his death, Sullivan killed 8 more people, 4 of which we could see in the game. And there are only 2 left, Eileen and Henry, numbers 20 and 21. The ritual is about to be completed, and Joseph says that the only way to stop Walter is, strangely enough, to kill him. But now he's a ghost, which makes it a little bit problematic to get rid of him. And the book called Crimson Tome can help them with it. There, our characters will be able to find a way how to stop 21 Sacraments ritual and kill Sullivan. After finding the book, they find out that this ritual won't bring Walter's mother back, but will summon the devil to this world. To stop it, our protagonists have to complete the following actions. First of all, find a part of the original body of Walter Sullivan, then lance his new body, which is represented here as Conjurer, with 8 spears, and only after that he will become vulnerable and his body will become mortal. Henry finally finds the key to unlock the door. The chains fall down and finally he's able to leave the room. But the whole building is still in the supernatural world. The needed piece of Walter's body will be found at Frank's apartment, the umbilical cord which Frank Sunderland refused to get rid of and has been keeping all this time. At that moment, Eileen suddenly changes her countenance and says that she has to return to the little Sullivan, and that only Henry can stop this madness now. Henry goes back to his room and finds another hole in the floor, jumps into it and enters the last level in the game. There's a huge gyroscope in the middle of the room that looks like a complicated mechanism and looking similar to the engine from the spaceship from the movie Event Horizon. And Eileen is slowly going towards it, being in some sort of trance. There are human bodies hanging around the perimeter with spares in them. And there is the mentioned Conjurer and the ghost itself. The final fight begins. Henry throws the umbilical cord into the Conjurer and starts collecting spares to kill the monster with them. After that, Sullivan's ghost becomes vulnerable to physical attacks. When a player does enough damage, Walter Sullivan will die. Victory is achieved and it's time for an ending. This time the finale depends on 2 factors. The first one is whether Eileen is still alive or not. As I've already told you, she's going slowly towards a gigantic gyroscope. And if the battle with boss happens to be long enough, she has all chances to die right there. The second thing that influences the ending is whether Henry managed to exorcise all evil paranormal activity from his apartment. Yes, we'll talk about his apartment later, just keep in mind that there are some demonic entities our protagonist can get rid of. Let's start with a good one. If Eileen survives and the room is clean from 80% of the entities, Walter will die without a reunion with his mother. After that, a beaten up Henry will leave his apartment and go outside. The following day goes to visit Eileen in hospital.
Thanks. Guess we'll have to find a new place to live, huh?
Everything will go slightly different if a player didn't manage to clear the apartment from supernatural entities. After the scene in a hospital, Eileen will say that she finally will be able to return to South Ashfield Heights again.
I guess I can go back to South Ashfield Heights now.
But Henry's apartment will be full of demons there. What else did he expect? Let's talk about the sad ones. Eileen and Walter die and Henry wakes up in his apartment safe and sound. From the news he finds out about numerous murders and that Eileen was one of the victims.
And now the news. Yesterday in Ashfield and the woods near Silent Hill, the bodies of 5 men and women were discovered. The police reported that all the murders appeared to be the work of the same perpetrator. They are continuing their investigation. 4 of the victims were found dead at the scene, and the 5th victim, a Miss Eileen Galvin, was transported to St. Jerome's Hospital, where she died a short time later.
And finally, if everything is really bad, I mean, if the room is full of ghosts and Eileen is dead, then despite the victory over Walter, the ritual will be completed. At that moment, Henry feels pain and little Walter will fall asleep on the couch in room 302. Having finally reunited with his mother.
Mom, I'm home. I won't let anyone get in my way. Gonna stay with you forever.
That was the 4th Silent Hill from the perspective of the plot. As you can see, it is barely connected to the previous parts and the town of Silent Hill itself. But this game also had many small changes in terms of the gameplay. First of all, the inventory was cut. A player didn't have to enter it like a separated menu. It just appeared in the bottom of the screen and had the capacity only for 10 items. I mean melee weapons, guns, bullets, quests items, etc. And only 10 slots for all that. Besides, bullets didn't stack, so every magazine cost 1 slot in the inventory. Actually, guns is a problem here. The variety of weapons is really low and bullets consume most of the space in the inventory. So you better use different sticks, axes, shovels and other weapons. And because of this reimagined inventory, players had to come back to the apartment over and over again to use the chest. The chest is used to keep all necessary and unnecessary things in it. For the first time in the series, some weapons could break. In the game, a player could find different types of golf clubs, for example, which could lose fracture strength and break after some hits. Along with the inventory, a picture with character status disappeared. Now it's only a health bar with HP left. Our protagonist doesn't find the flashlight, which was traditional for the series. Also, the radio that could warn you about enemies nearby disappeared. And also the mist almost disappeared. Henry didn't have to find a map of the level like in previous games. Damn, there is even no ending with aliens in this game. Although there were hidden hints about the unused channeling stone. Also, players could complain about some strange solutions and ideas. The most vivid example is the necessity to visit the locations that players had been to before for the second time, and nothing important is happening during these segments. The amount of backtracking in this game was outrageous. Besides, those levels are not even spacious, they are pretty much straightforward. Besides, the levels are furnished extremely poor, no details and additional items. In general, the graphics of the 4th game in comparison with the 2nd and more than that the 3rd one became degraded. The light is quite poor, textures are not very detailed except for the faces, they are still not bad. Henry Townshend, the main protagonist, is rather unemotional and definitely takes his time to show any emotion at all, especially in comparison with energetic and emotional Heather Mason from Silent Hill 3. We don't know almost anything about this character. He looks like a passenger in his own story, unlike all previous protagonists in the franchise.
Are you okay?
There was one more problem. I'm not even sure whether it's a problem, but some unknown outlines that players could see around characters in the cutscenes. Either the depth of field is messed up or just the developers didn't do everything properly. Maybe developers were trying to make it look like some kind of effect, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But still, some innovations worked extremely well both on the gameplay and the atmosphere. Of course, I'm talking about the apartment or the room I promised to tell you about so many times. When a player is inside it, the camera turns into first-person view, and this is the only place a player can calm down and relax a bit. It is allowed to save there, put the unnecessary stuff into the chest, and health automatically restores. Besides that, a player could do some other interesting things. For example, find all the notes that were hidden by a former owner, or look outside the window and observe the city living its own life, including neighbors. Also, there is an eye hole that allows players to see some interesting scenes, like how neighbors try to attract Henry's attention, how Frank Sunderland can't open the door with his key and remembers about the events that happened before. After some time, Henry will be able to discover a peephole and unblushingly spy upon Eileen.
Where did I put that damn broom? Oh, there it is.
And it looks cool. You can save, heal, gaze. And at the point when a player has to go and visit the levels for the second time, the room turns out to be not as pleasant place as it used to be. Auto regeneration disappears and the room goes insane. Windows are clapping, TV turns on, boots start walking by themselves, a piece of meat mews in the fridge, the eye hole bleeds, ghosts are coming from the walls, blood coming out of the plug, and other creepy things called hauntings. It would be a different matter if a player just didn't heal, but more than that, being close to those hauntings could harm Henry. The further you go through the game, the more of them appear, and if a player doesn't make a move, it will be extremely difficult to stay alive in such a place. Every time Henry encounters these so-called hauntings, he receives a headache and his life reduces little by little. Of course, there were ways to fight them. Firstly, Henry could find and wear a medallion that served as a protection, but it only gets rid of symptoms and doesn't cure the illness. Besides, it's not eternal and will break after some time, and our protagonist will have to look after another one. To completely get rid of this or that haunting, a player had to light up a ceremonial candle near it. In the past, we could see them all over the apartment of Joseph Schreiber, and these are the things that could influence the ending. All in all, the room is a great and atmospheric innovation, but there were also a lot of interesting things outside the walls of the room, and these are ghosts, creatures that could find you in any location. Walls didn't stand on their way and they couldn't be killed. Each one of them is one of the victims of Walter Sullivan. Their presence alone causes headaches and loss of health. In order to stand against them, a player could use those familiar medallions and candles, but all that was just a temporary solution. The only way to stop them was to pin down the ghost with one of the swords of obedience. The only problem is that there were only 5 swords in the game, and unfortunately more ghosts. At first, players had to beat the ghost for quite a while and then pierce it with the sword. Sometimes players could find silver bullets. These bullets were extremely powerful against ghosts. They could knock down ghosts instantly, and after that Henry could pin them down with a sword. Of course, you could pull out the swords again, but at that case, a ghost rises again and continues following Henry around. The first 10 victims were called 10 hearts, since Walter cut those organs out every time. We'll meet only 3 of them: Jimmy Stone, the priest of the cult of Silent Hill, Steve Garland, the owner of the pet shop, and Eric Walsh, the barman. The 11th was Sullivan himself, turned into a ghost and continued killing people. The 12th victim was a drug addict student, Peter Walls. The 13th was Sharon Blake. Her family was taken by the followers of the cult. She went to the woods to find them but found only the graves of her siblings. Sullivan killed her at that moment. The 14th was Toby Archbold, another priest who was shoved over the cliff by Sullivan. The 15th was a former owner of the room 302, Joseph Schreiber, and we already know his story. The 16th was Cynthia Velasquez. When Walter was young, he went to Asheville many times to meet his mother's apartment, and saw Cynthia a couple of times, and probably had a certain appetence, since the theme of her death is temptation. When Henry enters the subway for the second time, he meets the ghost of Cynthia, which reminds on type, a ghost from Japanese mythology. You could see the image of this ghost in such movies like The Ring or The Grudge. You could see her through the window going into the subway, and after her death, a player will be able to see police officers and ambulance at the same spot. The 17th was Jasper Gain. When Henry meets him, Jasper says that another strange person was hanging around there before Henry. This person could be both Walter Sullivan and Joseph Schreiber. Also, Jasper wears a t-shirt with Incubus in it, the boss from the first game. After returning to the apartment, Henry could hear on the radio that there was a fire in the whereabouts of Silent Hill and that one person died. That was probably Jasper, who appears afterward in the form of a burning ghost.
A special news report. In a forest near Silent Hill, the burned corpse of a 30-year-old male was discovered earlier today. The police have ruled it a homicide and are investigating. The numbers 17121 were reportedly carved into the man's body. Due to the marks on the victim, the police are investigating possible links to the Walter Sullivan case 10 years ago.
The 18th was Andrew DeSalvo, a warden in the water prison that also belonged to the followers of the cult. Walter was one of those who had been sent to that prison, and Andrew gave a bad time to the boy. Richard Brantree was the 19th. When Walter was a kid, he went to Ashfield many times to see his mother. It irritated Richard very much, and he worked off on the boy many times, and he paid the ultimate price for that. During the cutscene where Richard is dying, we can see Walter looking out of the window and pointing at something. After coming back from the hole, Henry could see a grown-up Sullivan in Richard's room, who also was pointing at the room that was close to Henry, the room number 303, where Eileen lived. And in the outer world, we could see that Walter was knocking the exact door. The 20th victim was supposed to be Eileen Galvin. Eileen comes from an old Irish name which means lively or pleasant, and Galvin means bright or white. Her name describes her attitude and behavior perfectly. The theme that is connected with her death is kindness and motherhood. Even when she was attacked and barely alive, she tried to comfort little Walter. According to another Crimson Tome, a document in a form of a book which was available for Silent Hill 4's website with a collection of backstories revealing some background information on Walter Sullivan and his victims, when she was little, she with her mother met a homeless Walter. Eileen wasn't scared of him and even gave him one of her dolls. Sullivan will offer this doll to Henry. If Henry accepts it and puts it in the chest in the room, a new type of haunting will appear. A dozen of dolls will appear on the wall moaning children's voices. When Henry meets Eileen in the hospital, she will join him in his adventures. For the first time, you're able to arm her up with a purse or a batoon or a chain. This way she'll be helping to fight against monsters, but a player shouldn't rely on her too much. She cannot be killed, but the more damage she gets, the more the curse will affect her in the end. You will start noticing more and more bloodstains on her body. The more bloodstains she has, the more cursed she will become. She will start moving slower, may start beating her broken arm or pronouncing unfamiliar sounds and words. Besides, she will behave differently in the last level. She may even start beating Henry actually. But the main thing, the more she is injured, the faster she'll be going towards Death Machine, shortening the time given for the final battle. Nevertheless, you can heal her, but not with first aid kits. Since her behavior changed because of the curse, only already mentioned candles can help her feel better. Besides ghosts, there were ordinary monsters that could be killed. But this time there is hardly any point of describing the symbolism of these monsters. The Lost Memories book that described the developing process and inspiration for almost every aspect of the game, like it was with the previous games, ended. And even those guesses and explanations that players offer are not that interesting. At first, players meet not exactly original or unique monsters, like sniffer dogs, dogs with long tongues, hummers, huge flying mosquitoes, tremors on walls or growing from dead bodies or floor, toadstools, the symbol of death and decomposition. And these mushrooms are quite inoffensive if you don't touch them. The guys coming out from walls and swinging their hands all over the place are much more dangerous. And you can knock them down just for a short period of time. Speaking about wheelchairs, there is no way to defeat them at all. Yep, just ordinary wheelchairs moving around. Henry has a headache because of them, and the player should be afraid of being rolled over by them. But the further you go, the more difficult enemies become. I would like to point out only one monster called Twin Victim. Two concussion children covered by a black matter and using their hands to move around. This is the 7th and 8th victims of Sullivan, Billy and Miriam Locane. Walter killed them both with a single swing of an axe. That's why they became a merged monster. By the way, they are the only victims who turned into monsters and didn't become ghosts. Then we meet more aggressive types of monsters like gumheads, ape-like creatures very similar to the rompers from the first Silent Hill. They even sound like monkeys. After some time they will become even stronger and take some kind of a weapon like a pipe or a golf club. All in all, those monkeys will evolve. Familiar nurses have been replaced by monsters called patients. They are half-rotten dead bodies sewn together. They use a metal pipe as a weapon, and if they take damage they will sound like a burp. And that's the only interesting thing about them, I guess. And now the most dangerous one is called Bottom. This creature, just like twins, uses its hands to walk, but its head is placed at the bottom of the body, a very dangerous and strong enemy. There's also one strange creature in the game, but it's extremely passive, even if you hit it. A huge worm is seen in different locations. Judging by some versions, this is the creature that creates holes in reality, which were used by our protagonist. There is a big number of creatures in this game, but as I said, the levels are not quite detailed and are full of light. So all attempts to frighten a player in this environment do not really work out. Besides that, the combat system has become clumsier. Now when you hit a target, it will move away from you little by little, so you have to make an extra step to come closer and make another hit. More than that, the game prioritizes moving enemies more than enemies lying on the floor, so instead of dealing the final blow to already bitten enemies, Henry will be aiming at all walking enemies nearby, completely ignoring already half-bitten enemies. Because of that, they will wake up over and over until all walking enemies around are either lying on the floor or really far away. Once again, thanks to Rooker666, we are now able to see some unused 3D models of enemies. Since Walter was an unwanted child, especially by his father, these models were probably supposed to be used to represent some suppressed memories or fears of Walter. For example, this male figure holding something wrapped into cloth. This one was probably Walter's father who was trying to get rid of the baby. Or this figure, probably Walter's mother. The third one is a nurse with a clear resemblance with Eileen and a patient, probably female. It is possible that at first Eileen was supposed to deliver a baby and she was supposed to be the first person Walter could witness, but these are just my guesses. Mostly the horror of the fourth game is connected with the room. When you're just walking somewhere and hear strange noise, you desperately try to find its source. But it turns out that it was Eileen who accidentally dropped her bag with products. After that you calm down a bit, think that everything's okay, but then something else happens and you can't stop thinking about it, desperately trying to find the source of the sound. And when the room transforms from a safe place into a nightmare, you feel extremely uncomfortable. But the main thing is that after you complete the game, this effect stays with you, especially if you live alone. Because any person can take the place of our protagonist. He didn't want to visit Silent Hill, he just happened to be at a wrong place at a wrong time and got trapped. When I showed you the cutscenes that Henry could see through the eye hole, you probably noticed those bloody headprints on the wall. At first there are 15 of them, the exact number of victims that died before the events of the game. And after every victim, another handprint will appear. Besides narrative cutscenes, a player could see some really scary things. For example, to see Henry behind the door through the eye hole, but dead, looking at a player giving a thick groan. In one of the chambers in the hospital, a player could see a rather terrifying picture. A huge head of Eileen stuck in the middle of the room, and her eyes will be following Henry as he walks around. This looks like a frightening mock over Henry. How do you like when somebody's watching you? There was a very interesting situation in the forest. If you pick a key from the wish house, you'll see the lettering. The holder of this key will wander for eternity. And it's true, as long as Henry keeps this key in his inventory, the location will be looped and will repeat itself over and over, not letting Henry reach the wish house. There's a rather interesting solution to this puzzle. A player should go through a hole to get into the apartment, put the key into the chest, and return back to the forest, reach the destination and grab the key by using the hole again. There's another very interesting moment connected with the prologue. A player wakes up in a completely dirty and messed up room and doesn't understand what's going on. Then a ghost came out of the wall and killed the player. At that time, a player controls not Henry but a former owner of this apartment, Joseph Schreiber. We can understand that from his commentaries, especially when he doesn't recognize Henry at the picture. There are some references to the second part. In fact, there are references in the second part to the fourth one. Those are of course two mentions about Walter Sullivan, one in a newspaper and one on the gravestone. You also may remember the message that was written on the wall about a hole. This could be the hole that Henry used to travel through locations.
Are you yearning for that special place to spend quality time with your loved one? Do you need to relax and get away from it all? Come to Silent Hill for the ultimate peaceful getaway.
There were some references to Silent Hill 3 as well. Robbie the Rabbit in 2 of his forms. One of them is lying on the bed in Eileen's room, and another one is an air balloon a player may notice sometimes in a window. As a tradition, after a walkthrough, different bonuses could be opened. 2 new modes. At the beginning of the game, a player could find all kinds of weapons in the game. The first game mode is called One Weapon Mode and will open for you after you complete the game with the best 10 stars rating. In this mode, Henry could grab only one kind of a weapon and use it until the very end. The second mode is called All Weapons Mode and opens for you after you finish One Weapon Mode with 10 stars as well. Besides, during walkthrough in this mode, you'll be receiving 10 health bottles and 6 packs with bullets every time you return to the apartment. There were also 2 bonus weapons, a chainsaw for Henry and an assault rifle for Eileen. And also some skins, but only for girls, Cynthia and Eileen. Cynthia wore even more revealing clothes, and the second girl wore a nurse's outfit. I'm not sure whether you noticed it or not, but there has always been something about toilets in Silent Hill games. In the first game, there were toilets everywhere. Silent Hill 2 started in a toilet and James Sunderland's toilet scene became a sort of a meme. In Silent Hill 3 again there are a lot of toilets, and Heather hides in one of them at the beginning of the game and sees the first save mark. And in the fourth game, the mysterious hole appears not somewhere, but in a toilet. The thing is that there are many horror stories in Japan that take place in toilets, like stories about Hanako-san or Reiko Kashima. Besides, until relatively recently, the Japanese still used the squat-type toilets that looked like a hole with 2 footrests. There was a story that some children had fallen in and got sucked into this hole. That's why Japanese people connect toilets with fright and horror. Silent Hill 4 was released almost simultaneously on 3 platforms: PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. The fourth part was a crucial part of the series. After its release, Team Silent was split up, and the development of the games was entrusted to the outsourcing studios, and the franchise started losing its quality. Some say that it all started from the fourth game, and some think that the fourth part was the last classic Silent Hill. But you cannot deny that the room had its own dark atmosphere with an interesting and twisted plot. After finishing the game, you feel a bit uncomfortable in the walls of your own apartment, and I think that says a lot. That's all for now. Thank you for your attention. See you in several weeks.